Shalom, I'm recording this when there is a huge debate going on in our society about the revision of healthcare. And I thought there'd be a good opportunity to talk about a form of healthcare that needs to be revised, and that is spiritual healthcare. This week that I'm recording this is the Torah portion, Ekev, which is the third portion in the book of Devorim, the final book of the Torah, in English known as Deuteronomy. And I think there's a very important message about our spiritual well-being and our need to put ourselves on the correct path. So what are the ideas of Ekev that can help us? Well, first, we have the very interesting idea that God tested us with hardship and along the way. And that evokes for us the memory of Genesis 22, which is the Torah reading on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which begins, Adonai Nisad Abraham, that God tested Abraham. In fact, the rabbis said that there were 10 different tests that Abraham had, not only about whether he would sacrifice his son Isaac, but whether he would lech lecha, he would go with Sarah to a place he did not know, and many other tests that he encountered in his life. There's an interesting thing going around on the internet now about a new rabbi in town who goes into a store, doesn't think anybody knows him, and he buys something, and the clerk gives him change back, and the rabbi looks at it and says to the clerk, "Oh, you gave me 25 cents too much." Clerk said, "Hi, Rabbi, how are you? I know you're the new rabbi in town. I was testing you to see whether you were honest or not." In fact, Judaism plays the role of Elijah being the tester, that you never know when a beggar is coming to you with his hand outstretched for tzedakah, whether it's for charity, whether or not that beggar is Elijah testing to have your heart. And the Torah talks about in this week's Torah portion how we have to circumcise our heart because our heart can be heavy. And it says specifically that you have to be very careful and to help and to love the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. So that's the first idea for a spiritual checkup, that we are tested constantly in our life. And we make decisions all the time based on whether we're going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. How often do we say, nobody's looking? It's interesting about this whole scandal with the bearded Orthodox Jews in New Jersey that were involved with money laundering that was exposed last week, and the Madoff thing, that I've read something from rabbinic colleagues who talk about how some of the ultra-Orthodox they know were condemning what they were the Moser, the person who turned these 5 rabbis in. Not that the rabbis were doing anything wrong in their view, or that but the really bad person was the one who turned them in, which is disgusting. They're being tested like everybody else, and they failed the test. And so prescription number 1 for spiritual revival of our health care is the idea that we're being tested, and we have to pass the test every day, many times a day. Number 2, I'll just tell you a story. I once was confronted by a Jewish kid who said to me, "How come our Bible doesn't have any of the good lines?" I said, "Like what?" He says, "Like man does not live by bread alone, and love thy neighbor as thyself." I said, ironically, the Bible has all the good lines, including love thy neighbor as thyself from Leviticus, Vayikra, and this week's Torah portion has man does not live by bread alone. Now, you might not think that that's controversial, but if you think about our lives, how many people live their lives as if bread is the only thing? And one of the rabbis' ideas was that bread is an equivalent to money. And how many people idolize money, who say that that's the be-all and end-all? How much money can I make? How many things can I buy? And the Torah is trying to say that we don't live by money alone, but by God. And then in this particular Torah portion, we also have the mitzvah, which is the consequence of that, which is v'achalta v'savata. When you've eaten and are satisfied, taking bread literally, or you can use it as a metaphor too, when you've eaten and are satisfied, what do? You don't go out and say, I'm so great, look at all the bread I own, or that I ate, or that I have. You uveirachta, the commandment is you are satisfied, you bless. And that's number 2, to constantly orient ourselves to blessing God. I just watched on TV, actually on Netflix, the movie A Life Apart, the story of Hasidim. And it was a very interesting thing. Whenever you think about Hasidim, the idea that they devote so much of their energy to loving God and trying to get close to God, a concept they call deveikut, clinging to God, is very inspiring in this regard. Something that non-Orthodox Jews don't do enough. The spiritual health care is that we have to understand that we don't live by bread alone, and that we have to adhere and cling to God and bless God for the goodness of our lives. Number 3, a very strong portion aspect of this Torah portion is the centrality of the land of Israel. In fact, the commandment to bless after you eat says, for the good land God has given you. And it emphasizes the special foods that are integral to the character of the land of Israel, out of which we make the Tu B'Shvat Seder, figs and almonds and dates and carob, pomegranates, things that are very basic to the land. So number 3 is a love of the land of Israel. And finally, one of the most beautiful sentences in the Torah portion, the question is, what does God ask of you? Now this reminds us of the verse from Micah. The question of Micah was, what does God doresh, seek from you? And his answer there was justice, mishpat, chesed, mercy, and sniut, walking humbly with God. Well, the answer here is a little different. It says basically 4 things. You have to have yira, which is awe of God. You have to have ahava, you have to love God. Lalechet, bidrachav, you have to walk in God's ways. And the word to walk, lalechet, is the root of halacha, which is the idea of Jewish law. And finally, la'avod, to worship. Now, avodah means work, and it also means to worship. That we have to, in our livelihood, see it as a way of seeking God and bringing godliness to the world and to worship God. Again, yira and ahava, awe and love, lalechet, to follow God's laws, and la'avod, to serve God in every way we can. I think that is a wonderful prescription for a spiritual health care renewal. First of all, to understand that we're being tested. Number 2, that we don't live by bread alone, that we have to thank God all the time. 3, the centrality of the land of Israel and being attached to it. And 4, to understand that God wants us to love God, to be in awe of God, to walk in God's ways, and to serve God. Shalom.